Hi everyone, it's Joel Howe, and this week I'd like to work on type in After Effects and also show you a little bit about 3D in After Effects. And so hopefully today we'll be able to create something like this where we use text to create elements and also use 3D perspective to simulate the depth effect that's here. All right, so let me get started with a new project. And we'll start with a new composition. And I'm going to start with a simple 512 by 512 pixel composition because this will be my wheel. And so we'll say okay. And so we're going to use text in After Effects. And in the example that I showed, we created the wheel using the word wheel repeated many times. And we also, so if I were to create I'm using the text tool, and I'm just doing a click and release to create a single line text. You can, of course, use, similar to Photoshop, a click and drag to create paragraph text. In this case, notice that the text is going to be based on my paragraph is center aligned, and so we can left, right, or center align, and that's going to change your anchor point, your registration point. I also have some existing margins that I should get rid of. Those carried over from a previous project, so let me get rid of those while I'm here. You should generally see that. Let's see, I'm going to select the text and make sure that here's our fill and stroke colors for the text that we have selected. And I'm going to just make sure that we have that. So if I take a look at the character panel here, open sans. And we'll use that for both. So let's see. Our wheel is going to, we're going to use the wheel word several times to wrap around, and our spoke is going to be a narrower, thinner spoke to the wheel. So we can change our overall font size and reduce it for the spoke. Maybe I'll left align this so that I can have that spoke be in the center. And maybe I will Control C and Control V and create basically a line with the word spoke. And I will Control D, duplicate that, and hit R for our rotation. And I'll drag that down to 60, duplicate, R, and 120. And if I wanted to be smart about this, I can duplicate R and go for the full 180. So there's my spokes. One of the nice things about text in After Effects, and I can just hit U to get rid of those. None of this is rotated, of course. Oops, don't want to drag that there. One of the nice things about text in After Effects is that it is going to be continuously rasterized. Okay, so now I need to take the wheel, and I'm going to repeat this on a curve around the so what I'll do is I'm just gonna copy that and paste it a few times. So this is, again, single line text, and now I will draw for my wheel layer. Let's see, I will draw a circular mask using the ellipse tool. So I'll hold the shift key, and that looks pretty good. And notice that mask is on this layer. And so I control down the text properties. There's a path options component. And so I can choose mask 1 for my path. And we have a few options in here. We can reverse the path, and that moves our wheel to the outside. And I think that one looks pretty good. I'm going to go back to the text tool and paste a few more times. Now we get some overlap there, which I don't want. So we have a few choices. I can select all, and now we can start to play with typical typographic layout, things like character spacing or tracking. And so we can use the arrow keys and work out the spacing that way. So that actually works out pretty well. And I think that will work. I've got my wheel layer. I've got my spoke layers. And I can just center those. And there's no overlap. I like that. That's working out pretty well. I especially like the angle on the S's there. Okay, so this comp is going to be comp bicycle wheel. All right. And we'll use that a few times because we're going to, of course, nest this with the bicycle. All right, so let's start with let's do another comp. I had a house. Let's see, this will be called comp house. And I'm going to keep the same exact resolution. I'm not worried because again, text is going to be resolution independent. So one of the things I can do is if I start typing the word house and single line text again, and I will use the pen tool, and for this layer, for the house layer, just draw a quick, and I'll hold the shift key down so I can get a basic outline going and match that up. And of course, when I draw it, it's a mask. And if I twirl down the text properties, again, we have our path options, and I can choose mask 1. And again, reverse the path. And that looks pretty good. So my situation again, I'll need a few more houses here. Paste, 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 paste. So there's our house. We got a little overlap at the very top there, so perfect. Okay, so there's our house comp. Let's make a new composition. And this one we will make an actual, let's just set the presets here. So 1280, 720, square pixels, 30 frames per second. And it looks like I'm set to frames instead of actual time here. And I can change that, but if I have 30 frames per second and I want to do a 10-second animation, that should be just pretty much 10 seconds. If you find yourself with frames, you can control click this to create, to show the actual time, frames and seconds and minutes. So I must have been working with frames before. All right, so this will be our comp 3D text. And I always like to put in the resolution here. So this will be 720p. All right. And so into this main comp, let's put our bicycle wheels and some houses. All right. So houses are going to go in the back. So I'm going to drag those down below. And I'll turn those off for right now. The bicycle wheels, I'm going to hit S to bring up the scale. And let's scale those down to something that fits into our scene. And I'll just round it down to a nice even 50%. Let's see. So we have a bicycle here, and we could certainly work with our making a bicycle comp that had the wheels and a bicycle frame together. But for right now, I'm just going to use the pen tool, and let's see. Bicycle frame would look, actually let's do this. Let's get a layer started first. And I'll just control copy paste, copy paste, copy paste. Can always have too much. And now I'll use the pen tool to draw the bike frame. So we'll start at the back here, and we'll have a swing arm from the rear wheel up to here. Maybe this goes up to the seat and kind of stays up there a little bit. Oops. Looks like I clicked and started a new mask there. We'll need to come down. There would be pedals, and then we would go up to above the front tire. Maybe go up to a handlebar. Actually, we can just keep that as is, and we'll keep this simple. So I've got a roughed in shape for a bike frame, and we could bring this back and like so, and that'll have to do. And so, of course, similar technique, we would just change the path options to the mask we just drew. I like the bigger font size, so I'll keep that, and we'll just get rid of this text here. It's kind of fun to edit this all contorted. And if I go back and I can use the tool, you know, we can select individual points and change that. And we could also just as easily go in and select with the text tool, select all, Control A, oops, with the text tool, select that frame, Control A, and again start to play with tracking. So this would be the beginning of the bike, and we can put a seat here. Let's see. Yeah, let's do this. We've got our frame here. I can take that layer, pre-compose it, and say this is the comp bike frame seat bars. And so now I would have the frame, and I could take a text layer and quickly put in a seat and make that much bigger, and put in handle, much smaller, and then maybe Control D to duplicate, double click, bars, and set that rotation just to get a handlebar shape. Okay, so if I go back to we've got a couple of comps that we've set up here. We don't need this render cube because we'll use Adobe Media Encoder. Bicycle wheel, the house itself. We have our comp that has our everything in it, and then we have the bike frame seat bars. Okay, and so you can see there's the bike frame seat bars, and I think these are looking pretty good. What I would do right now is, because these are lined up, I think this is a great time to take the two wheels and link them to the seat and the bars. If we rotate, they would follow as well. Let's turn on the visibility of the house in the back, and we can play with scale for these. So if I choose one of these houses, I can scale it, and I can choose this house and scale it, maybe not as much, but so there'll be clearly one that's closer to us just by the illusion of scale. It's bigger. For being similar houses, we would assume it's closer to us. And I think I'm ready to start animating. One thing I will go back and do really quickly is set our composition to 10 seconds for the wheel. And of course, that would have been smart to do right up front, but it's very quick and easy to fix that. And you can see that that's available there and there. The house is also only 5 seconds long. I'll double click on the house comp. I'll go to composition settings, set that to 10 seconds because our overall animation is 10 seconds. and then we just have to extend that so that the house fills the full duration of the comp. Okay, and so these two can be here. So now we have a full 10 seconds of footage. All right, and so now let's animate. I'm going to hit P with our bike frame seat bars selected, and I'm going to, at frame 0, just take the X value and drag that bike off the stage. And now I'll turn on the stopwatch to time vary our position. Scrub to the end of the comp, 10 seconds, and I'll wheel this across. So we're getting a full pass of the bike. And it doesn't look like it's moving very much right now. But give us a second. Let's take the bicycle wheels. I'll select them both. And I'm going to hit R for rotate. And turn the stopwatch on so that rotation will vary over time. And I'm going to look at these. Ideally, you could just calculate the circumference of these and calculate the distance and get a perfect rolling. I'm going to say that these are maybe 3 or 4 diameters, or I'm sorry, circumference across, maybe 3. So if I go out here and I say set not just the individual values, but just 3 full rotations, then let's see how that looks. That actually looks pretty good. It looks like there's a little slippage with the wheels, but in general, I think that's not too bad. That's not too bad. Now I want to take this and just add a few more text elements to it, because what I'd like to do is start to experiment with 3D. We can have the houses. We could do, if we wanted to fake 2D motion, we've got our bike going by, so it would be very straightforward to take our houses and move those over here and hit P, begin animating, and then just move those to the left so we'd have some motion. And this would look like this. And that looks pretty good. And because there's different scale of the houses, basically if this house was further away, there would be a parallax effect, so that the further house would actually look like it was moving less because it was further away. So in that case, maybe at the very end here, this house hasn't moved as much. And we might be able to see a difference there. Pretty subtle, but it works. And so you could figure that out for all the various elements in your scene. These are working okay for now, but if I were to, I think I used the word street in the previous example. So if I make a new layer here, let me call this street, and we make this very big. What I can do is we could distort this if we wanted to, but I'm showing my switches here, and I can turn on the 3D option for this layer. So the street layer I just created it enables 3D position, rotation, and scale. So when we look at our transform, it looks significantly different, because now we can change position in 3 dimensions. We have a Z dimension that will go into the screen, and we have a scale, so we can scale it in all 3 dimensions, and we have X, Y, and Z. And I just happen to animate to change the X value, and I think that's actually okay. So so now I've got kind of a street started. If I wanted to use that 3D effect, let's move the street below the bike and the wheels, just in case we wanted to cast shadows later. And let's delete these 2 houses in the back. And I'm going to add 2 more copies of the house comp. All right. And what I'll do with these as an alternative is just to move these. Actually, these would be maybe, oops, double clicked on there by accident. Drag those below. I'm going to turn on the 3D layer option for both of those. I'm going to, oops, select this and twirl down to see the transform. And so we can start to adjust these. But instead of using the scale, I'm actually going to use the Z position. So it's currently 0. And if I increase that, it sends it back into the distance. And I can still use my X and Y to change position here. Now select the other house. And again, I'll look at the transform there. And I can push this back into the scene. I can alter that wherever I need to, but that looks fine. So we have the houses actually positioned back in the scene using the Z depth of a 3D layer. And so the last thing I want to do, if I select all and hit U, we'll collapse everything there. I'm going to create a new camera. So in this case now, we'll actually be able to use a camera and change our viewpoint. Instead of actually moving the houses to fake motion, we'll actually move a camera across the screen. And so when we create a camera, you can see there was a little refresh there. And we have, let me fit up to 100%. And the camera is basically right in the scene. If I were to change my view from the active camera to a custom view, you can see that this is actually a camera looking at a 3D scene with perspective and different depth, and the bike is way up there. So all the 3D layers that are enabled would show up here. If I turned on 3D for the bike, you can see it there too. So if I go back to the active camera view, the camera is basically looking at the scene directly on by default. And that actually works fine for us. If I go to transform, the camera is again a 3D object. And I can start to zoom in if I want to, using the Z position change, just vertically, using Y and X. So if I want to start with most of the elements here, I can use X over here, animate the position, and we still have that bike motion, and then change that and have it go like so. Okay. And so if I just play this through right now, you should see some of the parallax effect actually happening, so that we get the left house appears to be moving more than the right house because that's closer. We could make that more pronounced if I let's look at the positions, and these aren't animated. Remember, the only thing that's animated right now is the wheel rotation and the camera. So I could push this. Oh, I'm pushing them both back because they're both selected, of course. Let's position that there, and maybe that's up a little bit more, and let's bring this a little bit closer. So now there's even more distance. The smaller house, or the house that appears smaller, is physically further back. And so now you'll see there's not a lot of movement there, and we've got the house there, and we've got the bike rolling by. So far, so good. I think one last thing I'd like to do is just try to, at the very back, is create a, I think this was in the original example. And this is, let's see. Nice thing about the text tool, when you're close to it, you have your text cursor, and you can select all, and we can bring this down to something reasonable. And then if you move the text tool away, it turns into a move tool. So that you can jump back in and then jump away and move things. So I like that a lot. And so we'll Control C. All right, so I've got that text layer selected. This is going to be my backmost layer. And I'm just going to draw a shape like that. And of course, we can twirl that down and set the text properties and make that mask a path. Maybe we take that and we dim it a little bit so that it's actually set in the background. All right, so it would be great if we filled in some of the houses so there'd be a little, maybe some darkness here, and we'd start to build more depth. And we can see that when we added the camera movement, it changed the positioning of the bike. The bike is no longer just off screen. It's actually quite off screen so that we don't see the bike for the last 1.5 seconds. So what we can do is actually go in and just change these properties now that we've seen the camera so that this goes off screen at the very end and just is off screen at the very beginning. And that way the bike will be taking up more of our precious 10 seconds worth of time. Now, one last refinement. The bike wheel spinning. Again, this is a function of the camera move changing things. Now we get a spinning effect here where the wheels don't look as grounded. So we could change the wheels here to something like 2 and 2 and see how that looks. That's a little bit better. And so we'll just give this one final preview. So this covered drawing text on a path. We did some very basic text property changes. We took the text layers and made them 3D layers, and we started to organize those text layers so that we had a 3D scene with depth in the scene. So I think that's probably all we have time for today. I hope that this helps and sparks some ideas for some of your animation projects. Thanks for watching.